In all capitalist countries, the right socialists, the Blums, Guy Malays, Bevins, Spacks, Renners, Schumachers and surrogates are the main advocates of cosmopolitanism, inveterate enemies of national sovereignty, which is regarded by them as an obsolete prejudice. They preach world government under the aegis of the US British imperialists. The acceptance of the notorious American way of life, which is praised by them, would in practice mean turning of peoples not only into drought animals, but also into cannon fodder for the Wall Street capitalists. I think that's pretty succinct.
The best estimate by leading vaccine producers is that it could take a year or more to develop, test, and manufacture a vaccine for the clade X virus.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. You know, is the price worth it? That the price, we think the price is worth it?
Richie Brown Show.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Diplomatic Post. Now we are going over Sadiq Khan's Cosmopolitan gibberish message that he put out on his Twitter recently. We're going to examine it and see how it links into cosmopolitanism and the ideology of the imperialist bourgeoisie. Let's get into it.
It's not about how long we live, but how wide we live, said someone to me.
Now see, the first thing to notice is that within 5 seconds they've displayed a street full of the MK Ultra CIA kind of pride flags, and this is to remove the identities of people, their national identities, to strip them of any kind of national obligation or societal obligation or communal obligation as we increasingly become more atomized individuals.
Said someone to me as I was trying to cry secretly on a bench in Kilburn.
I mean, that sounds absolutely terrible, doesn't it? If someone's crying on a bench in Kilburn. This is the poem that Sadiq Khan's put out.
They said, you're just like me, so that means you're different. I pray to the east, you pray to the sky, but in London, we're in the same position.
These are essentially two people that have just met. One's crying on a bench, and the other's, complete stranger, nothing in common. No cultural language in common, not even the same gods as common. They pray to different gods.
I don't know you, but I'm proud you're my neighbour.
Why would you be proud of a complete stranger that you don't know? Why would you be proud that they're your neighbour? Much more likely, you would let them die and their body wouldn't be discovered for 2 years in a flat. Like Joyce Vincent died 2 years, a corpse wasn't discovered, Or how about Laura Wynnham? 3 years. She wrote she was starving in her diary. She died and no one discovered her body for 3 years. Or how about or Sheila Salone, 58 years old, lay undiscovered in a flat for 2 years. She died. So why exactly would you be proud someone that you have nothing in common with is your neighbour?
So glad you're here with me. You bring different experience.
Again, just 24 seconds and we've seen a street full of pride flags and now a street full of trans flags. I mean, the creator of this flag had a nappy fetish. That's why he used the soft blues and pinks. And that's the kind of culture that is just accepted in imperialist society today.
Different wisdoms. You belong here, so be wide here. Being here isn't about origin or intelligence. It's about bringing your elements.
So you don't have to have come from here. You don't have to have had, anything in common with the people growing up. Just bring your so-called elements.
Expand yourself with whoever's next to you. Lean on me until we blend skins. Blur yourself so you can focus.
Watching this, it looks and feels like an MK Ultra CIA psyop. It's very unsettling.
The picture includes you. Draw on the human experience so you can illustrate humanity. Humanity starts with hue. Community ends with unity. It's not about how long we live, but how wide we live.
I mean, they said community begins with unity, but has anyone been into British communities recently? How unified are they exactly? I'd say that everyone's becoming like a kind of individualized atom, a new stage in human evolution. Homo economicus just drifts economic zones to the next, nothing in common with the next person.
About how deeply stitched each of
54 seconds, and there's a prevalence of pride trans flags.
our fibres is. Everybody is London material. Each of us was cut from a different cloth.
So you see, everybody was London material, so no one belongs in London. If everyone belongs in London, no one does. This is the ideology of the capitalist imperialists.
And have become the fabric of a community. No matter where you can trace our threads back to, Timbuktu, Lahore, Hanoi. London means weaving our fibres into stronger fabrics, So our outfit is strong enough to endure the storms and keep us.
So the claim here is being made that diversity is kind of like a strength and it should be pushed. Never in human history has diversity been a strength. There's always been unity has been strength. That dates back in many civilizations, thousands of years. Unity is strength, or some kind of variation of that saying. Never has diversity been a strength.
Maybe you're a lake who believed they were just a puddle, befuddled that your ripples could turn into waves. Maybe you think you fell from the sky and landed here by chance, but that means the ground was extremely lucky. We improve spaces by taking them up. The gift is meant to be open.
I mean, it's a difficult one because it's pure just cosmopolitan gibberish. You see, I don't think people are loved and wanted in London. There was that advert a while back, that psychotic advert about being in London, about rising up. I'll see if I can find it.
They say nothing comes easy. And looking back, it's hard to disagree. The mornings that felt like night. The days that melted into months and years. The missed opportunities. The doubts. The need to be different. To define yourself. To be more than individual. To stay true to what you believe. Make the impossible possible. To rise and rise. Yes, they say nothing comes easy. But if it was easy, then it wouldn't feel as good. To look out at the city that could have swallowed you whole and say, I did this. To stand with the world at your feet.
So that's the kind of ideology that is pushed in London, this cosmopolitan gibberish of rising above other people as if they're cattle and you're somehow superior to them. I mean, that advert is like Patrick Bateman style crazy. So this is from my article on Four Soviet Scientists, Proletarian Internationalism versus Einstein and Capitalist Cosmopolitanism. And yeah, F. Chernov was on the Central Committee for the Soviet Union. He wrote for the magazine Bolsheviki, which was edited by Stalin. And in this article, Bourgeois Cosmopolitanism and its Reactionary Role, he writes, an anti-patriotic group of rootless cosmopolitans in theatre criticism aspire to spread national nihilism, alien to Marxism, Leninism, and deeply inimical to the Soviet people. National nihilism is a manifestation of the anti-patriotic ideology of bourgeois cosmopolitanism. Disrespect for the national pride and the national dignity of people, as Comrade Stalin said. National nihilism only injures the cause of socialism, acts as a tool for bourgeois nationalists. Comrade Stalin strongly spoke out against those who suggested that the struggle with nationalism must at the same time throw away everything that is national. National nihilism in our conditions is a form of struggle chosen by rootless cosmopolitans against Soviet patriotism, against Soviet culture, national in form, socialist in content. It is a display of their cringing before bourgeois culture. In this way, national nihilism, with its attitude towards the great Russian people and the other peoples of our nation, time and again was linked in the minds of rootless cosmopolitans with bourgeois nationalism, which is today is separately tied with the cosmopolitan ideology of the imperialist bourgeoisie. So in London, they're trying to create this kind of blanket ideology where you're not really rooted to anything. You have no origins in anything. And then you just pick up a pride flag as your identity. And then he followed that up with the most poisonous ideological weapon of the hostile capitalist encirclement is bourgeois cosmopolitanism, consisting in part of cringing before foreign things and civility before bourgeois culture. Rootless cosmopolitanism produces special dangers because cosmopolitanism is the ideological banner of militant international reaction, the ideal weapon in its hands for the struggle against socialism and democracy. Therefore, the struggle with the ideology of cosmopolitanism, its total and definitive unmasking and overcoming, acquires in the present time particular acuity and urgency. I mean, we know Sadiq Khan is part of the Fabian Society. Let me see if I can find it. So these are some protesters disrupting a Fabian Society meeting.
As the former...
We are here today to make a peaceful,
The
non-violent...
133-year-old Fabian Society's New Year conference has been disrupted just before the London Mayor Sadiq Khan was due to speak. Members of a group calling themselves the White Pendragons halted proceedings for several minutes, shouting "No EU" and claiming the Society, a left-wing think tank, was subverting our English constitution.
It is a pleasure to be here, even though we were distracted by the actions of what some would call very stable geniuses.
The protesters also expressed support for Donald Trump, but many in the audience booed and cheered when police intervened to remove the protesters, and a counter-demonstration of Remainers took the floor.
So the ideology of the Fabian Society is basically liberal eugenics. So here's George Bernard Shaw, the book George Bernard Shaw. He was a Fabian member, and the Fabians have always heavily believed in eugenics.
Whatsoever. I don't want to, but there are an extraordinary number of people whom I want to kill. Not in any unkind or personal spirit, but it must be evident to all of you. You must all know half a dozen people who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. And I think it would be a good to make everybody come before a pre-appointed board, just as he might come before the income, and say every 5 years, 7 years, just put him there and say, "Sir," or "Madam." Now, will you be kind enough to cut? If you're not pulling your weight in the boat, if you're not presumed, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of ours for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us, and it can't be of very much use.
So that's what the Fabians believe. So with Bertrand Russell, who has a lot to answer for our new dark age. Carol White wrote a fantastic book on that called A New Dark Age. But he also was massively into eugenics, and he was a proponent of forced sterilization for negative eugenics of so-called mental defectives. And H.G. Wells, he was another Fabian Society member, and I am asking for a liberal fascisti, he told the Oxford Union in 1932, for enlightened Nazis. The world is sick of parliamentary democracy. The fascist party is Italy, the communist is Russia. The fascists of liberalism must carry out a parallel ambition of a far grander scale. Now, I think this gets to the root. A lot of posts recently on the Fabian Society, and they try to track this into communism because the Fabian Society declares itself a socialist organization. But, you know, socialism is massively popular, and the Fabian Society itself has a wolf in sheep's clothing. And the Fabian Society was instrumental in getting Clause 4 rid of in the 1990s under Tony Blair, under which the Labour Party would no longer fight for socialism. So the people who claim that the Fabian Society is heading towards so-called communism, it's just slop. And of course, who else is a member of the Fabian Society? Well, that would be Kim Leadbeater, who penned this article for the Fabian Society in 2023. And I've previously reported on the Diplomatic Post that the money behind Kim Leadbeater for the assisted dying bill was for organ harvesting, and it was for the imperialist bourgeoisie. So, I mean, I've got this article before, you can read it yourself, but I'll just give it a quick flick through. So the More in Common that funded her campaign for the assisted dying, these were the adverts they put up celebrating death and portraying euthanasia as healthcare. Their primary funders were the Robert Bosch Foundation, the European Climate Foundation. A lot of the climate stuff links into the eugenics movement. The Foundation du Crédit Mutuel, Open Society Foundations, that's the George Soros Foundation, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation and the Battery Foundation. And they are all Malthusians. The Open Society Foundations are Malthusian. The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation are Malthusian. They have a PDF titled The Population Programme that I went into detail in this article on Kim Leadbeater's assisted dying campaign and the Dignity in Dying campaign, and how they plastered billboards full of smiling happy people about to have euthanasia. And it was essentially, the Belgians have a similar thing in that they're salivating at the prospect of being able to get hold of all the organs from the euthanasia campaign. And that's why Canada has emerged as a central hub for the biggest organ donations. So the people bleating on about the Fabian Society being some kind of socialist organization are just full of shit. It is the Fabian Society, they created the Labour Party, but the Labour Party have step by step, every single step of the way, have been in lockstep with British imperialism. They supported the empire, they supported invading Korea in the 1950s. They supported every reactionary war you can think of, just with a socialist gloss, so people could be fooled by the Labour Party. And this is what they really actually want. This is from the Club of Rome Committee of 300, organised in 1968, and they divided the world into 10 kingdoms. And you see kingdom number 2 is the Economic Union. Number 1, now including Mexico, is the North American Union. And they're trying to create an African Union, a Eurasian Union. So this is how they want to divide the world. And then when you're in an economic zone, you'll be able to work there like you can for the EU. And the aim is to basically destroy any roots in human beings, any ties to anything. So you just flee from one economic zone to the next. And the economic rationale behind that is quite simple. So under capitalist society, labour power is a commodity. You buy and sell labour on a market. So the buyers of labour power want as much labour power, as much of that commodity on the market as possible to drive down wages. And so this is from a CPB-ML article. Those who might think that they should leave their own country should instead stay and fight for their country's own independence and build socialism at home. The solution is not to desert their own countries and become rootless victims of capitalism. Labour power is a commodity traded like any other. In effect, job centres no longer need to be in Brixton and Liverpool to have the required impact. They can just as well be in Bangalore and Lagos. So, it's pretty easy to see. And so, globalisation is the free movement of labour and of capital. And capital views the whole world as its reserve army of labour. It has to keep that reserve army of labour to keep a section of the working class looking at the lumpen proletariat, the people that don't have jobs, that are stuck in drug-infested communities and that kind of thing. So the working class need to have a bottom they can fall to. And in capitalist society, that's like destitution, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, all these like kind of deaths of despair. That's why Sadiq Khan released this video, to essentially push the ideology of the imperialists, which is a completely global state, a world government, where labour can be bought in any country from, like Liverpool to Bangalore. So is this some sort of grand communist plot? Or is this capitalist imperialists dividing up the world into economic zones that they can use as they please? So after the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima, there was a call for world government by the US and British imperialists. And Einstein issued a call for world government, and that was published in the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists. And to refute this, 4 Soviet scientists wrote an article rebutting Einstein's claims for world government and why they would never accept that. World government is aim of imperialists. First of all, the ideas of world government and superstate are not at all a product of the atom age. They have a long enough history. It is enough to recall that they have already been promoted at the origin of the League of Nations. Furthermore, in the present historic epoch, such ideas were never progressive. They reflected the fact that capitalist monopolies, which are dominant in the principal industrial countries, have not enough room within the framework of their own countries. They need world markets, world sources of raw materials, and regions for investment capital. Domination of monopolies in political life and in the state and machine of great powers permits use of this machine for their struggle for spheres of influence and for economic and political enslavement of foreign countries, which must give the monopolists a chance to possess foreign territory as at home. And then they pointed out that the October Revolution was breaking out of this system of slavery by the capitalist monopolies. The Great October Socialist Revolution smashed the chains of economic and political dependence of our country on world capitalist monopolies. The Soviet government for the first time made our country a truly free and independent state. These pacifist and liberally inclined people believe world government may be a panacea for securing stable peace. Supporters of world government are widely using allegedly radical phrases to the effect that state sovereignty in the atom age has allegedly become a survival of old times, and that this, as Belgian delegate Spaak said at the General Assembly of the United Nations, is an old, outmoded idea and even reactionary idea. It is difficult to imagine statements which could be further from the truth. We know this perfectly from experience of our country's past, which is not so long ago. Under Tsarism, foreign capitalists greedily flocked to Russia with its reactionary regime, which was subservient to capital with its low wages and tremendous natural resources. French, English, Belgian and German firms plunderingly made themselves at home in our country, receiving tremendous profits which were unthinkable in their own countries. They chained Tsarist Russia to the capitalist West with chains of enslaving loans. Money received from foreign banks to the Tsarist government suppressed the revolutionary movement in the country, handicapped the development of Russian science and culture. The Great October Socialist Revolution smashed the chains of economic and political dependence of our country on world capitalist monopolies. The Soviet government for the first time made our country a truly free and independent state, advanced with a tempo unprecedented in the history of humanity. The development of our socialist economy, techniques, science and culture, and made our country a reliable bulwark of peace and security of the people. I mean, you need only have a look at Soviet culture, which was far superior to Western culture, far more enlightened. They continued the Enlightenment period under Soviet socialism. Their science, they produced the best scientists in the world, the best mathematicians. They were printing 3 out of 5 books on the entire world at one point. You know, they put the first man in space, created the first nuclear power plant, first woman in space, first satellite in space. So many achievements. Moving on to Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer is also a Fabian Society member. He's also a member of the Trilateral Commission, which also had the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein as a member. Now, the Trilateral Commission was created by David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski. I thought I'd treat you to a little graph. It was quickly getting far too complicated, but I thought I'd stick this together anyway. So you start here at the Fabian Society. You have all the members that found it. They were all liberal eugenicists like H.G. Wells, Sidney Webb, Beatrice Webb, Graham Wallace and Bernard Shaw. They founded the London School of Economics, which the LSE has basically presided over our neoliberal period. They also created the Labour Party, and they created it in such a way they would only ever be a vehicle of liberalism, no matter how many people professed to be socialists. And that's why F. Chernov was given the Bevins addressing down. So if we look at just some brief connections here, so you've got Sir Mark Allen, who went to work for MI6's Middle East desk. He fixed a BP Libya oil deal. Yeah, and he went to work as a special advisor to BP after he left the Foreign Office in 2004. And then he's on the advisory board of the London School of Economics. And then if you go to David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski, they created the Trilateral Commission, which Keir Starmer is a member. And 200 members of Labour Party are Fabian Society members. And the Trilateral Commission in the 1970s, they wrote a document called The Crisis of Democracy. And in that document, they basically said that democratic processes were getting in the way of running global capitalism. And Trilateral Commission features, it's very much the same as the Club of Rome, it is monopolists getting together to decide how to run the world. That is capitalist imperialists, people who seek to open new market. And continuing on about the Trilateral Commission, so you got Carney, Starmer and Mers, the rise of the trilaterals. This is from Labour Heartlands. And they point out how Chancellor Mers is now leader of Germany, and he's a former Goldman Sachs banker, and the Bank of England governor, Carney, is now the Prime Minister of Canada. And the Trilateral Commission is a secretive enclave of bankers, industrialists and policy architects operating beyond democratic accountability. I mean, the economic basis of all the socio-economic ills of imperialism, as Lenin proved, is monopoly. Monopolies are powerless to overcome the contradictions of the capitalist economy. Lenin linked the parasitism and decay of imperialism organically with the tendency of monopoly to inhibit the development of productive forces in general, to deepen the disproportional development between branches and of the national economy as a whole, to fail to utilise the human and material productive forces and capacities, with a tendency to hinder the application of the new developments of science and technology to the benefit of the masses and the progress of the entire society. That sounds a bit complex and complicated. It's frankly not. You only need to look at like the American food pyramid that was completely corrupt. The Diabetes Association in America still advocates giving loads of carbohydrates to diabetics. You know, what we saw with COVID, with science, you know, Anthony Fauci declaring himself to be the science. The massive pseudoscience in the climate movement. They just publish anything. So you've got all these monopolies, and the only way they can retain their power is by retarding technical development and the economic forces, which produces on the face of it a completely parasitic society. And this is from Georges Cogniot, who was a member of the Central Committee of the French Communist Party, and he wrote an article titled cosmopolitanism, weapon of predatory US imperialism. In its struggle for world domination, predatory US imperialism makes wide use of the ideology of bourgeois cosmopolitanism as a weapon to enslave the peoples who are defending their national independence and sovereignty. On the way to world domination, US imperialism encounters the persistent, ever-growing resistance of all who treasure national independence and freedom of their homeland. The ideology of cosmopolitanism declares the conception of national sovereignty to be obsolete, preaches complete indifference to the fate of one's own homeland, national nihilism, and declares the very concept of nation and state independence to be a fiction. Cosmopolitanism denies the patriotism of the masses of the people, patriotism which is a bar to the realization of the predatory plans of the imperialists. It plays into the hands of anti-popular, anti-patriotic forces of the bourgeoisie, which demand capitulation before US imperialism. The patriotism of the bourgeoisie, said Marx, has degenerated into sheer hypocrisy since its financial trade and industrial activities have acquired a cosmopolitan character. And then continuing, he says, it is common knowledge that US competition is strangling the British and French and ousting French cinema production. One British member of parliament was quite right in speaking out a veritable Niagara of vulgarity, false sentimentalism, cynicism, and pornography which distracts the attention of readers in martialized countries. That's referring to the Marshall Plan there. From the real America with its poverty, millions of unemployed, cultural backwardness, racial discrimination, and its struggle against progressive science. The dissemination of the pseudoscientific Mendelian and Morgan theories in biology, the idealistic and metaphysical conceptions in physics, psychology, and teaching, and in general, the propaganda of objectivism in science, formalism, and abstraction in art, the spreading of the idealistic decadent theory that literature and art must be divided from the people and from reality. All this goes hand in hand with the intensification of brutal police repressions against honest and patriotic-minded cultural workers, with the systematic deterioration of their living standards and invariable reductions in budget allocations for cultural needs. All this is done on the US model and on its insistence. All this is tainted with cosmopolitanism. The real content of cosmopolitanism in the realm of culture is reaction and decadence of a neo-fascist character. It is the penetration into other countries of the well-known barbaric culture which characterizes imperialist America. I think that's fascinating that he was writing that back in the 1950s, because Americans like to think they're an enlightened culture, but they're obviously a decadent and barbaric one. So I think it's pretty important to talk about American civilization at the moment. The USA is the #1 purchaser of sex with children in the world. The industry of purchasing sex from women and minors, 2/3 being minors, produces $152 billion for that market every year. A third of that is produced inside the USA. It's the #1 nation in the producing of pornography. It's #1 in minutes viewed per day watching pornography. And American Gen Z is the #1 generation on Earth viewing the most porn per day. The USA leads the world in child pornography consumption. And I'm going to add in a little Kim Il-sung quote here. As the marketing channels are clogged to a greater extent, capitalists are moving towards deforming the material life of people by creating an artificial, inhuman demand. They are manufacturing a variety of things to stimulate extravagance, corruption, and dissipation, and to paralyze the human body and mind, with the result that the number of drug addicts, alcoholics, as well as degenerates pursuing abnormal desires, is growing rapidly, and people are becoming mentally and physically deformed. Even the defenders of the bourgeoisie are lamenting and calling this phenomenon an incurable disease of modern capitalism. That's from Kim Il-sung's Collected Works, Volume 9. There's that famous saying that how America went from barbarism to decadence without civilization in between. As with the struggle for peace, for independence, and against the colonizing policy, the struggle for culture demands that cosmopolitan tendencies to be resolutely repulsed. In all capitalist countries, the right socialists, the Blums, Guy Malays, Bevins, Spacks, Renners, Shoemakers, and Surrogates are the main advocates of cosmopolitanism, inverter enemies of national sovereignty, which is regarded by them as an obsolete prejudice. They preach world government under the aegis of the US British imperialists, the acceptance of the notorious, quote, American way of life, unquote, which is praised by them, would in practice mean the turning of peoples not only into drought animals, but also into cannon fodder for the Wall Street capitalists. I think that's very succinct. So who was Cognio referring to there with the Blums, Guy Malays, the Bevins, Spacks, Renners, Schumachers and Saragats? He was referring to Ernest Bevin. And if we go to Ernie Bevin, we can see he is a member of the Fabian Society. And as we can see there, Ernie Bevin, a man who studied at the Fabian Night School, who dared to shout down Stalin at Potsdam, was one of our greatest statesmen, who with his commitment to realism brought us the NATO alliance that is still the bedrock of our security and fought for a nuclear bomb, as he put it, with the Union Jack on top. A Fabian member is literally credited with creating NATO, that Cognio accuses of being a cosmopolitan imperialist. So you have to ask yourself, are the Fabians, are they a communist group or are they an imperialist group, specifically a British liberal one? And that's from my article on Four Soviet Scientists, Proletarian Internationalism versus Einstein and Capitalist Cosmopolitanism. It's a bit of a different article. It examines how Einstein was pushing for world government after World War II and the bombing of Hiroshima, and how four Soviet scientists came out against Einstein and argued why they would never accept world government. I think we should end on the last bit of the Organ article I wrote. The working class has two paths before them. One is to endeavour to maintain at all costs the existing class domination at the expense of the requirements of productive development, as well as the expense of all human cultural values. This means in practice to strangle the powers of production, to retard technical development, to destroy material and human forces, to crush the development of ideas and thought, and to concentrate the entire society on organisation for war, leading in turn to still greater destruction and decay. And that's from Rajani Palm Dutt's Fascism and Social Revolution. And the other alternative is to organise the productive forces as social forces, as the commonwealth for the entire society, and to raise rapidly and enormously the material basis of society, destroy poverty, ignorance and disease, and march infinite in every direction to expand science and culture, and not just for the bourgeoisie to wield as class weapons at the proletariat's throat. To organise communist society in which all human beings can reach full stature and play their collective part in developing humanity. These are the two paths placed at the proletariat, who are the living representatives of productive forces. The bourgeoisie routinely burn grain, vegetables and clothes when too much is produced. Today they want to burn bodies. And that's where I leave it. Catch you on the next one.